The wrench slipped from my hand. The moment I got the call, my daughter had been in a terrible crash and was fighting for her life in the ER. I called my son-in-law again and again, but he never picked up. Then my grandson whispered, "Grandpa, Dad's been acting weird." Just then a woman stepped toward me and said, "You need to see these." She handed me her phone and swiped through the photos. By the fifth one, my grip tightened, my knees weakened, and I could barely stand. Welcome to Calm Family Revenge. I am grateful you are here. Drop a comment and tell me what city or country you are watching from. I want to know how far this reaches. And one thing worth noting, some details in this story have been shaped for storytelling purposes. But everything it teaches you, that part is yours to keep. The wrench slipped out of my hand at 3:47 in the afternoon. I remember the exact time because the clock on the wall of my garage has been running 4 minutes fast for the last 6 years, and I have never once bothered to fix it. My wife used to say, "That was the most honest thing about me. I would rather adjust to a broken clock than pretend it was something it was not." Her name was Carol. She passed 11 years ago. I still talk to her sometimes in the garage when nobody is around to hear an old man make a fool of himself. That Friday afternoon, I was underneath a 2003 Chevy Silverado that belonged to my neighbor Pete Garfield, trying to coax a rusted exhaust bolt into cooperating. The radio was playing a Merle Haggard song I half knew. The light coming through the open garage door was that particular shade of golden amber you only get in Salem, Oregon in early September, when the summer is not quite finished fighting the autumn. I had retired from Mullen Auto Service 7 years ago. But retirement, I had discovered, mostly meant I fixed things for free instead of charging for it. I did not mind. My hands needed something to do. Idle hands on a man my age meant too much time sitting in a quiet house thinking about a woman who was no longer in it. My phone was on the workbench, screen up. It rang. The number read, Salem Health. I set the wrench down carefully. That was a lie I told myself later. The truth is, I did not set it down. It fell out of my fingers and hit the concrete floor with a clang that rang through the whole garage, and I was already reaching for the phone before the sound stopped echoing. Mr. Mullen. The voice on the other end was a woman professional, steady, in the careful way that nurses learn to be steady when they have to deliver bad news to people who are not ready for it. This is admissions at Salem Health. I'm calling regarding your daughter, Dara Mullen Holt. My legs went soft at the knees. I grabbed the edge of the workbench with my free hand. What happened? My voice came out rougher than I intended, scraped raw. She was brought in by ambulance approximately 20 minutes ago. There was a vehicle accident on Highway 22. She sustained significant injuries, Mr. Mullen. The surgical team is being assembled right now. I need you to come in as soon as you can. The garage seemed to tilt slightly. I pressed my palm flat against the workbench and breathed through my nose. How bad? I said. Tell me straight. A half-second pause. The kind that says more than words. The trauma surgeon will speak with you when you arrive. Please come quickly. I pulled the phone away from my ear. My thumb found Spencer's name in my contacts. Spencer Holt, my son-in-law, Dara's husband of 4 years. I hit call. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. His recorded voice came through the speaker, cheerful, professional, the voice of a man who sold commercial real estate and had learned to sound like he was always about to offer you a good deal. I hung up and called again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. I grabbed my keys off the hook by the garage door, the ones for the Ford F-150 I had driven for 16 years, because I knew every sound that truck made and I was not interested in learning a new one. I called Spencer 2 more times on the way out of the driveway, weaving out of the cul-de-sac onto Commercial Street, with the phone pressed to my ear in a way I would normally never do. He did not pick up. I drove to Salem Health in 11 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on the dashboard the entire way, the same way you watch something when you know it is the only thing you can control. The emergency parking lot was half full. I pulled into the first open space I found, killed the engine, and sat there for exactly 3 seconds with both hands on the wheel. Carol. I said out loud to nobody, to her, to whatever version of her still existed somewhere in the universe. I need you right now. Then I got out of the truck and walked through the sliding glass doors. The pediatric ICU waiting area was on the second floor. I took the stairs because I needed something to do with my legs. At the top of the landing, I turned left, and that was when I heard it, a child crying. Not the quiet, confused crying of a kid who had scraped a knee. The full-bodied, broken-open sobbing of a little boy who did not understand why the world had stopped making sense. Caleb. He was 7 years old, and he was sitting in a plastic waiting room chair with his knees pulled up to his chest and his face buried in his grandmother Norma's shoulder. Norma Holt, Spencer's mother, a woman in her late 60s with silver hair and a practical demeanor, had her arm around the boy so tight she might have been trying to hold him together through sheer will. I crossed the room in 8 steps. Caleb. I crouched down in front of him, put both hands on his knees. Hey, Opa's here. He lifted his head. His face was red and wet eyes swollen nearly shut from crying. When he saw me, his whole body lurched forward and he grabbed the front of my shirt with both fists. Opa. His voice was a wreck. They took Mommy. They took her away and they won't let me see her. My chest felt like someone had reached inside and squeezed. I know, buddy. I got my arms around him and held him. I know. The doctors are helping her right now. That's their job. They're very good at their job. I looked up at Norma over the boy's shaking shoulder. Her eyes were red. She mouthed the words, surgery. Already. Where is Spencer? I said, keeping my voice even. Norma's expression shifted. Something complicated moved across her face, concern, and something else underneath it, something closer to shame. I have been calling him since I got here, she said. An hour ago. He is not answering. My jaw tightened. I kept my face neutral for Caleb's sake. He probably has his phone on silent, I said, because the boy was listening to every word. I will get a hold of him. Norma looked at me steadily. She knew I did not believe what I had just said. I knew she did not believe it either. But Caleb's grip on my shirt was loosening slightly, and sometimes the most important thing you can do for a child is refuse to let them see that you are afraid. I held my grandson and watched the door to the surgical ward and called Spencer Holt 4 more times. He did not answer a single one. A woman I had never seen before was standing near the window watching me. She was in her early 30s, dark hair, a face that had recently been crying and was trying very hard not to start again. She was holding her phone in both hands like it was something she was deciding whether or not to drop. Mr. Mullen, she said. I'm Joelle Fitch. I work with Dara. I was with her this morning. We had coffee before our shifts. Do you know what happened? I asked. No. Her voice cracked slightly. They just told me she was in an accident on 22. I drove straight here. She hesitated. Her fingers tightened around the phone. Mr. Mullen, there's something I think you need to see. My stomach dropped a full floor. Show me, I said. Joelle turned the phone toward me without a word. The screen showed an Instagram post. The account belonged to someone named Talia Voss. Profile picture: a woman in her early 30s with highlighted blonde hair and the kind of smile that had been practiced in a mirror. The post had been made 2 hours and 14 minutes ago. It showed a sun-drenched deck of a luxury yacht somewhere warm and blue. In the background, the skyline of downtown Miami stretched along the horizon like a promise. And there, leaning against the railing with a drink in his hand and his arm around Talia Voss, was my son-in-law. Spencer Holt was wearing a white linen shirt, sunglasses I had never seen before, and the easy grin of a man who had not a single thing on his mind. The caption read, "Paradise Found." There was a location tag, Miami Beach Marina. The air went out of me so completely that for a moment I forgot I was standing in a hospital hallway. I looked at that photograph for 5 full seconds. Then I said, "Give me your phone for a moment." Joelle handed it over without hesitation. I took 4 screenshots. I noted the timestamp 1:32 p.m. Pacific time, which meant the post had gone up while Dara's ambulance was still en route to this hospital. I saved the profile. I wrote the location tag in the small notebook I kept in my breast pocket, the same one I used to write down part numbers and customer complaints for 40 years. Then I handed Joelle her phone back. "Thank you," I said. Joelle's eyes were brimming. "Mr. Mullen, I'm so sorry. I didn't know if I should show you, but I thought—" "You did the right thing," I said. "You did exactly the right thing." I turned toward Norma. She had been watching me from across the room. She could not have seen the screen from where she sat, but she could read a face. She had been reading faces for 68 years, and what she read in mine made her stand up slowly from her chair. The way people stand when they are bracing for something they already know is coming. "What is it?" she said. I walked to her. I held out my phone, the screenshot already pulled up. She took the phone. She looked at the photograph. The color drained out of her face so completely and so quickly that for a moment I genuinely thought she might faint, and I put one hand on her elbow. "Norma." I kept my voice low because Caleb was 6 feet away, occupied now with a children's book a nurse had brought him. Norma's mouth opened, her chin shook. Then she pressed her lips together so hard they went white, and her eyes filled and spilled over at the same time. That woman," she said barely above a whisper. "Who is that woman?" "Her name is Talia Voss," I said. "She is listed as his tennis instructor at the country club." Norma made a sound low in her throat, something between a sob and a word that did not make it all the way out. Her hand came up and covered her mouth. "How long?" she said through her fingers. "I don't know yet. And he is there right now. Right now, while Dara is—" She could not finish. Tears were running freely down her face. She turned away from Caleb and bent forward slightly, her shoulders shaking. "Norma." I put my hand on her back. "Stay with Caleb. I need you to stay with him. Can you do that?" She straightened, took a long, unsteady breath, reached up and pressed the heels of both hands against her eyes. When she lowered them, something had shifted in her expression. The grief was still there, all of it, but underneath it now was something harder and colder. Resolve. "Yes," she said. "Go." I stepped into the hallway and called Spencer one more time. Voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I called a third time, and on the 4th ring the line connected. Hey, Dad." Spencer's voice was loose, slightly elevated, the particular register of a man who had been drinking in the afternoon sun and was surprised by an inconvenient call. "What's going on? Is everything— Where are you, Spencer?" A pause. Not long, a half-second, but enough. "I'm in Miami," he said. "Client meeting ran long. I was going to call Dara tonight and explain. You know how it gets when—" "Dara is in surgery," I said. "She has been in surgery for the last hour. She was in an accident on Highway 22 this afternoon." The line went so quiet I could hear wind and the faint sound of water somewhere on his end. "What?" His voice dropped entirely. "What did you just say?" "You heard me." Your wife is in the operating room right now. Your son is sitting in a waiting room crying for his mother. And you are on a yacht in Miami with a woman named Talia Voss. Another pause. Longer this time. I'm coming, he said. His voice had changed completely. The ease was gone, replaced by something that sounded genuinely shaken. I will get on the first flight. I swear to you I did not know. I know you didn't know, I said. Get here. I hung up. 4 hours later, the elevator doors at the end of the hall opened and Spencer Holt walked out. He was still wearing the white linen shirt from the photograph, now wrinkled from the flight, his hair not quite right. His face was pale and tight, with something that looked like real fear. Caleb saw him first and launched himself across the room. Daddy? The boy hit Spencer at full speed, arms around his father's waist. Daddy, Mommy is in surgery. She got hurt. The doctors... Spencer went down on one knee and grabbed his son, and I watched his face crumple for just a moment, genuine, raw, unguarded, before he controlled it again. I know, Bud. His voice cracked. I know. I'm here now. He looked up at me over Caleb's head. His expression was complex and frightened. I looked at him steadily. I did not say anything because Caleb was holding his father, and that boy needed one thing in this world to still be intact. But it was Norma who spoke first. She had crossed the room without either of us noticing. She stood over her son, with her arms at her sides, her face dry now, all the tears already spent, replaced by an expression I had never seen on her before. Quiet fury, the kind that does not shout because it does not need to. Get up, she said. Spencer looked up at his mother. Something flickered in his eyes, a reflex of a child who still somewhere deep down knew when he had done something unforgivable. He stood up slowly. Caleb stayed pressed against his side. Norma looked at her son for a long moment. Then she said quietly and clearly, You left your wife alone so you could drink champagne with another woman while she was fighting for her life. And you want me to tell you it is going to be all right. Her voice was completely level. I cannot tell you that, Spencer. I will not tell you that. Spencer's eyes went red. His jaw worked. He looked at me. I didn't know, he said. I swear I didn't know she was hurt. I looked at him for a moment. No, I said. But you knew you weren't where you were supposed to be. A nurse directed us to a family consultation room down the hall, a small windowless space with 4 chairs, a box of tissues on a side table, and the particular fluorescent light that seems designed to make everything feel slightly more hopeless than it already is. Norma sat in the corner with Caleb, one arm around the boy, who had finally exhausted himself into a quiet, glassy-eyed state. Spencer stood near the door with his hands in his pockets, not quite able to make himself sit down. I took the chair across from him and set my notebook on my knee. Tell me about the trip, I said. Spencer looked at me. His eyes were red, his jaw tight. Can we talk about Dara first? What did the doctors say exactly? The surgeon told us guarded but optimistic, I said. 48 hours will tell us more. The doctors are doing everything they should be doing. Right now, I need to understand what happened, so tell me about the trip. He let out a long breath through his nose and ran both hands over his face. I flew to Miami on Wednesday, he said. I told Dara it was a property deal, mixed-use development out of Brickell, legitimate client. I do work in that market. That part wasn't a lie. Fuck, what part was, I said. Spencer's hands dropped. He looked at the wall. Talia was there, he said. She flew down separately. We've been... He stopped, started again. It's been going on for about 8 months, maybe a little longer. Norma made a sound. It was small and involuntary, the sound of someone who has just been confirmed in their worst suspicion, and it seemed to cost her something physical to make it. She pressed her lips together and stared at a fixed point above Spencer's head. 8 months, I said. I know. He looked at me now and his eyes were genuinely pained, and I want to be clear that pain was real. Whatever Spencer Holt was or was not, he was not a man who felt nothing. I know how it sounds. I'm not going to try to justify it. Good, I said. Don't. Caleb shifted against Norma's side, too tired to follow the conversation, and she murmured something into his hair and pulled him closer. Spencer said, I had nothing to do with what happened to Dara today. I need you to know that. I watched his face when he said it. I had spent 40 years reading customers who swore the engine light had just come on that morning. Guys who said the transmission had been fine until it wasn't. I knew the face of a man trying to hide something, and I knew the face of a man who was genuinely terrified. Spencer's face in that moment was the second thing, but the fear was not quite right. It was not the fear of a guilty man being caught. It was something else. Something tighter, something more specific. Spencer, I said, did you know anything was going to happen to Dara today? No. Fast. Too fast. Absolutely not. Has Talia ever said anything to you about Dara, about your marriage, about what she wanted to happen? He went very still. The fluorescent light hummed above us. Caleb's breathing had gone slow and regular against Norma's shoulder. The boy had finally fallen asleep in his exhaustion, his small face slack and faintly tear-streaked. Spencer said in a voice that was barely above a murmur, She wanted me to leave Dara. She had been pushing me for months. She said, He stopped. What did she say? I kept my voice neutral. I had learned a long time ago that the moment you raise your voice is the moment the other person stops talking. She said that I was wasting time. Spencer's jaw tightened. That if I was serious about her, I would have already made a choice. She had a way of saying things that made you feel like there was no option except the one she had already picked for you. Were you afraid of her? I asked. He looked up sharply. The question had landed somewhere unexpected. His eyes went through several things in rapid succession: denial, then something that looked almost like relief at being asked directly. I don't know, he said finally. I don't know what I was. I wasn't thinking clearly. I hadn't been thinking clearly for a long time. I wrote 2 words in my notebook, not for any legal purpose, just to anchor them somewhere outside of my own head where I could look at them later. She pushed. One more question, I said. When did Dara last have the car serviced? Spencer blinked. The shift in topic caught him off guard. I don't. A few weeks ago, maybe. I think Dara mentioned it. Did you take it in? No. He shook his head slowly. I didn't. I've been in Miami more than I've been home this month. I closed my notebook. I did not say anything else because there was nothing else to say yet. And because the surgeon appeared in the doorway at that exact moment, a tall woman in scrubs with her mask hanging around her neck and the measured expression of someone who has practiced delivering difficult news. Family of Dara Mullen Holt. We all looked up. The procedure is complete, she said. She is stable. The next 48 hours are critical, but she tolerated surgery well. She paused. You can see her briefly. Immediate family only. Norma woke Caleb gently. Spencer took a step forward. I stayed in my chair. Because as everyone else moved toward the door, one thought had settled into the center of my chest, like a bolt dropped into an engine block, heavy, cold, and impossible to ignore. Spencer had not taken Dara's car in for service. So who had? The drive from Salem Health to my house on Dokes Ferry Road took 14 minutes that night. Caleb sat in the passenger seat with his seatbelt on and his chin tucked down and his hands folded in his lap like a much older person. He had stopped crying somewhere around the third-floor stairwell of the hospital, the way children sometimes do, not because the grief had passed, but because the body simply runs out of fuel for it. His eyes were dry and enormous and fixed on something outside the windshield that I did not think was the road. I did not try to fill the quiet with words. I had learned that about children, they will talk when they are ready, and if you push before they are ready, you get the door instead of the room. I made him a grilled cheese sandwich when we got home, because it was the only thing I was certain he would eat. He sat at the kitchen table and watched me work the pan without saying anything. The kitchen smelled like butter and bread and the faint residue of motor oil that had lived in this house so long it had become part of the walls. I set the sandwich in front of him. He picked it up, took one bite, set it down. "Opa," he said, "is Mommy going to die?" The question hit me somewhere between the sternum and the throat. I pulled out the chair across from him and sat down so we were at the same level, the way my father had always done with me when there was something real to be said. "The doctors are working very hard to make sure that does not happen," I said. "Your mommy is strong, Caleb. She has always been strong. She cried once," he said in the distracted associative way that children move between thoughts. "I heard her in the bathroom. The door was closed, but I could hear." My chest tightened. "When was that?" He considered. "A while ago, before school started. She thought I was asleep." I kept my face still. "Did you ever hear your mom and dad argue?" He picked up his sandwich again, took another small bite. "Not really argue. More like Dad would say something, and Mom would get really quiet. Like when she's trying not to cry in front of me." "Did you hear what they argued about?" "Dad would go outside sometimes," Caleb said in the same matter-of-fact tone he might use to describe the weather. "Like late at night, he'd go out to the backyard and talk on the phone. I could see the light from his phone screen through my bedroom window." He paused. "One time I heard him say, 'I miss you so much,' and then laugh. That kind of low laugh. Not like a funny laugh, like a secret laugh." My knuckles had gone white around my coffee mug. I relaxed them deliberately. "You said one time a woman came to the house," I said gently. "The lady with the blonde hair. You mentioned that before at the hospital." "Joelle said something about a blonde lady," Caleb said, nodding as though confirming a known fact. "Yeah, Chloe, no wait." He scrunched his face. "The lady's name started with a T. I remember because it was like a weird name, not like a normal name." "That's okay," I said. "You don't need to remember the name. She came when Mommy was working nights," he said. "I was supposed to be asleep, but I was thirsty, and I came downstairs and she was sitting in our kitchen, drinking out of Mom's mug." His brow furrowed slightly. "The one that says world's okayest human that I gave Mom for her birthday." Something very cold moved through me. "What did your dad say when he saw you?" I asked. "He told me to go back to bed. He said she was a work friend, a business friend." Caleb looked up at me with those enormous eyes. But she didn't look like a work friend, Opa. She looked at me like she didn't want me there, like I was in the way. I got up and refilled my coffee mug at the counter, mostly so the boy could not see my face for a moment. I breathed through my nose slow, and even the way I used to breathe when a customer's car had a problem I had not seen before. The kind of problem that required calm thinking, not reaction. "One more thing," Caleb said. I turned back around. He was looking at his plate. His voice had dropped slightly, the way it does when children say something they are not entirely sure they should be saying. The blonde lady told Dad something once, he said. I was at the top of the stairs. They didn't see me. He paused. She said if your wife was gone, everything would be so much easier for everyone. The mug in my hand felt suddenly very heavy. I set it down on the counter with great care. Easier, I repeated, keeping my voice completely neutral. That's what she said. Caleb finally ate the rest of his sandwich in 3 quick bites, the way kids eat when they have gotten something off their chest and their appetite comes back. Is that a bad thing to say, Opa? Yes, I said. That is a very bad thing to say. I waited until he was asleep, which took less than 10 minutes, the sleep of a child who had cried himself empty, and then I sat at the kitchen table with my notebook and wrote down everything he had told me. Every word, every detail. The mug, the backyard phone calls, the secret laugh, and the sentence that the blonde woman had said at the top of the stairs. If your wife was gone, everything would be so much easier for everyone. I looked at those words for a long time. Then I looked at the time, 11:47 p.m., and thought about Spencer's face when I had asked him whether Talia had ever said anything about Dara. He had gone very still. That stillness had not been nothing. That stillness had been a man who knew exactly what had been said and had decided in real time how much he was willing to tell me. I closed the notebook. Tomorrow morning, I needed to look at a stretch of Highway 22 with the eyes of a man who had spent 40 years understanding why machines fail. The fog was still sitting low on the Willamette Valley when I drove out to Highway 22 the next morning. It was not yet 7 o'clock. Salem in early September has a particular kind of morning cool enough that you can see your breath if you stand still, pale gold light, filtering through the Douglas firs, along the road, shoulders, the kind of quiet that makes you feel like the day is still deciding what it wants to be. I had left Caleb asleep in the spare room with a note on the kitchen table and a box of cereal on the counter. Norma had agreed the night before to come by at 8. I needed 2 hours, maybe less. I pulled off onto the gravel shoulder at the point where the skid marks were still visible on the asphalt, 2 thin black lines that began abruptly and ended just as abruptly at the edge of the guardrail where it had been bent inward by the impact. The repair crew had not come yet. The bent rail was still there, the grass on the embankment below still flattened where the car had gone over. I got out and stood on the shoulder in the early morning chill and looked at the road. The first thing I noticed was what was not there. This section of Highway 22 heading west toward the coast was not a dangerous road. Not here, not at this point. The grade was moderate, maybe a 6% decline for a quarter mile, then it leveled out. The pavement was clean and dry. There were no sharp curves, no blind intersections, no reason for a careful driver with a well-maintained vehicle to lose control on a clear Friday afternoon. Dara had been driving this road for 6 years. She knew every mile of it. I walked to the start of the skid marks and crouched down. 40 years of looking at cars had taught me to read what tires leave behind. A panic brake from a vehicle with functioning brakes, full hydraulic pressure, both front and rear engaging leaves, a mark that starts wide and dark and fades as the car slows. What I was looking at did not do that. The marks were short, abrupt. They began light and went dark almost immediately, and then just stopped. Not the progressive darkening of a driver standing on the brakes, the sudden desperate stamp of someone who pressed the pedal and found almost nothing there. The financial had not gradually failed. It had given out fast. A vehicle moving at highway speed down a 6% grade with no functioning brakes would have I did the arithmetic in my head, the way I always did force and momentum and friction, the same equations I had been running since I was 22 years old, under a car in my father's garage, approximately 300 feet before it hit that guardrail. Maybe less, depending on whether she had tried to downshift. She had tried. The gear damage would tell that story eventually. But it had not been enough. A patrol unit pulled up behind my truck while I was still crouched on the shoulder. A young officer got out, hand on his belt, expression professionally cautious. "Sir, this is still an active scene. Can I ask what you're doing here?" I straightened up. "My name is Garrett Mullen. The driver of that vehicle is my daughter." His expression shifted. He came a little closer. "I'm sorry for what happened, sir. You shouldn't really be." "I know I shouldn't," I said. "I'm not touching anything. I'm looking." I pointed at the skid marks. "Officer, I spent 40 years as an automotive mechanic. Those marks are not consistent with a driver losing control of a functioning vehicle. That is a brake failure, not gradual sudden. And the car was serviced recently." He looked at the marks, then at me. "The initial report classified it as a possible loss of control weather." "There was no weather," I said. "The road is dry. Look at it." He looked at the road. He looked back at me. "Sir, if you have concerns about the mechanical condition of the vehicle." "I do," I said. "I need to know who has access to that car right now and whether anyone has inspected the brake system yet." He pulled out a small notepad. His demeanor had shifted, not convinced, but no longer dismissive. "The vehicle is in impound at the city yard on Commercial. It's been photographed but not yet mechanically inspected. That would require a request from the investigating officer," I said. "I know how it works. Who is the investigating officer on this?" "That would be Detective Crane, Arvid Crane, out of the General Investigations Unit." I wrote the name in my notebook. "Yum, I'll be in touch," I said. I walked back to my truck. I sat behind the wheel without starting the engine and looked at those skid marks one more time through the windshield. 40 years. I had seen brake fade from overheating. I had seen master cylinder failures that gave you a soft pedal and a long, slow warning. I had seen caliper seizures and leaking wheel cylinders and every variation of hydraulic failure that a passenger vehicle could produce. What I had never seen, not once in 40 years, was a brake system fail that fast, that completely on a vehicle that had just been serviced, driven by a woman who checked her tires every month and had never once in her life let a maintenance schedule slip. This was not a failure. This was a decision. I started the truck. I pulled out of the gravel and back onto the highway heading north toward Salem, and I called the one person I trusted to help me figure out what to do next. I said when he answered on the second ring, my voice flat and certain in a way it had not been since the phone rang yesterday afternoon. "I need you. Can I come now?" "Front door's open," Dex said. "Coffee's on." Dex Pruitt had been a Salem police officer for 26 years before his left knee and a particularly stubborn city pension board had conspired to retire him at 61. He lived 4 streets over from me in a house that was slightly too large for one person and slightly too full of fishing equipment for any practical purpose. We had been neighbors for 11 years and friends for 10 of them ever since he helped me track down a catalytic converter thief who had hit 3 cars on our block in one night, using nothing but a gas station receipt and a working theory about human laziness. He was sitting on his back porch when I came around the side of the house, 2 mugs of coffee on the table between the chairs, like he had known exactly when I would arrive. "You look like you slept 2 hours, he said. "Closer to 1. I sat down and picked up the mug. The coffee was strong and black the way he always made it, the way I had drunk it every morning of my adult life. "Thank you for this," he said. He leaned back in his chair with both hands around his mug eyes steady on me over the rim and waited. I talked. I told him everything in the order it had happened. The phone call, the hospital, The photograph on Joelle's phone, Spencer, coming off the flight, still smelling faintly of salt air and expensive sunscreen. I told him about the consultation room and Spencer's face when I asked whether Talia had ever said anything about Dara. I told him about Caleb at the kitchen table and the sentence the boy had heard at the top of the stairs. Dex did not interrupt once. That was one of the things about him. 26 years of interviewing people had made him genuinely comfortable with the space where other people's words needed to land before he said his own. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, turning his mug slowly between his palms. "The skid marks," he said. "You're certain?" "I am. Not brake fade, not a soft pedal buildup, sudden loss, near total, at speed on a decline." I set my mug down. "Dex, I've rebuilt brake systems from scratch. I know what a hydraulic failure looks like from the outside. That road is telling me the fluid was already gone when she hit that pedal." He nodded slowly. "Then somebody cut the line. Or compromised it," I said. "Not necessarily a full cut. Could be a partial incision deep enough to fail under pressure after a few miles of driving. Designed to hold until it doesn't." Dex set down his own mug and folded his hands over his knee. "And the car was serviced recently. Spencer says he didn't take it in. I haven't confirmed where it went yet. That's my next stop." "What's the Gara?" "Dawson Auto on Commercial. Chet Rowan runs it. I've known him 15 years. Dex looked out at his backyard, a square of dry September grass with a sprinkler that had given up sometime in July. A Stellar's jay was working over the bird feeder at the fence line, loud and completely self-satisfied. "Here is what I would tell you." Dex said, "If you were one of my old patrol guys coming to me with this, first, don't go into that garage hot. Don't tell Chet what you think happened. Ask questions like you don't already know the answers. People give you more when they think they're informing you rather than confirming you." "I know that," I said. "I know you know it. I'm saying it anyway, because you are not a cop, and you are also not a stranger to this situation, and those two things together have a way of making a man lean forward when he should be leaning back." He looked at me directly. "Second, whatever Chet tells you about that car, write it down on the spot. Don't reconstruct it later from memory. Word for word as close as you can get." "Already doing that." "Good." He paused. "Third thing." He leaned forward slightly, elbows on knees. "When you get to that garage, look around. Look at the building. Look across the street. Look at every surface that might have a camera on it that isn't the Gara's camera." I looked at him. "Why not the Gara's camera? Because if somebody tampered with that car, and they were smart enough to tamper with it without getting caught, they were smart enough to think about the Gara's camera." He held up one finger. "But they probably didn't think about the camera across the street, the ATM at the bank, the pharmacy drive-through, the pawn shop with the fisheye lens above the door." He settled back. "Nobody ever thinks about the camera across the street. In 26 years, I caught more people on footage they didn't know existed than footage they tried to destroy." Something shifted in my chest. Not hope exactly, it was too early for hope, but the specific sensation of a problem acquiring a shape of something formless, becoming something you could get a grip on. "The camera across the street," I said. "But don't go looking for it yet," Dex said. "Go to Chet first. Get his account. Then look. If there's a camera and it shows something, you don't want to have gone poking around it before you have a witness statement in hand. You want the sequence to be clean." I picked up my coffee mug, finished it. "What if Chet doesn't remember anything useful?" I asked. Dex almost smiled. It was the expression of a man who had spent 26 years watching human beings consistently underestimate how much they had noticed without realizing it. Chet Rowan has been running a one-man gara on Commercial Street for how long? 19 years, I said. Then Chet Rowan notices everything that happens in and around that garage and has strong opinions about all of it, Dex said. Your job is just to ask the right questions and get out of the way. I stood up, set the mug down. Thank you, I said. Dex waved it off. Call me after you talk to Chet. And Garrett. He waited until I looked back at him. His expression had gone serious in a way it had not been for the rest of the conversation. If this is what you think it is, you are going to need to be very careful about the order in which you do things. Because the moment this woman, Talia, knows somebody is looking at her, she is going to start moving. I thought about that. Then I won't let her know, I said. I walked back around the side of the house to my truck, and I drove south on Commercial Street toward Dawson Auto Repair, and the whole way there, I kept thinking about what Dex had said. The camera across the street. Dawson Auto Repair had been on Commercial Street NE for 19 years, and it looked every one of them. The painted sign above the bay doors had faded from red to a dusty salmon. The concrete apron out front was stained with the accumulated evidence of 2 decades of oil changes and coolant flushes, and the kind of work that never fully washes away. There were 2 vehicles in the bays when I pulled in a minivan with its hood up and a Subaru Outback on the lift, and the sound coming from inside was the particular symphony of an honest shop air compressor, cycling impact wrench, chattering a radio playing something with too much twang and not enough melody. Chet Rowan came out of the back, wiping his hands on a shop rag when he heard my truck. He was in his mid-50s, broad through the shoulders, with the kind of forearms that came from 30 years of turning wrenches rather than from any gym. We had known each other the way mechanics know each other, in a mid-sized city, not close friends, but the kind of men who nod at each other at the parts counter and know enough about each other's work to have an opinion. Garrett. He extended a clean enough hand, and I shook it. Haven't seen you since the Marion County show last spring. What brings you in? My daughter's car, I said. Dara Mullen Holt. She drives a 2019 Subaru Forester dark green. Oregon plate. I can give you the number if you need it. Something moved behind his eyes. Recognition. The woman from the accident yesterday, he said. Not a question. He had seen it on the news or heard it through the network that connects all small businesses on the same street. That's your daughter. It is, I said. She is in surgery at Salem Health. I am trying to understand what happened to her car. Chet's jaw tightened. He folded the shop rag over once then again, the way a man does when he needs something to do with his hands while he thinks. Come inside, he said. We went into the office, a small room off the main bay desk, covered in invoices, a whiteboard with a weekly schedule. The smell of burnt coffee from a pot that had been sitting on its burner since sometime that morning. Chet leaned against the desk and looked at me steadily. When did the Forester come in? I asked. 3 weeks ago, he said. Give or take. I'd have to pull the date from my records. Who brought it in? Chet exhaled through his nose. That's the thing, he said. It wasn't your son-in-law. I've never met your son-in-law. It was a woman. Blonde hair, maybe 30, 32. She said she was a friend of the family. Said she was doing them a favor dropping the car off for a checkup. My pulse moved up 1 notch. I kept my face neutral. What did she ask for specifically? I said. Chet's eyes went to the middle distance, the look of a man reconstructing. That's the other thing that stuck with me. She didn't ask for a standard service. She asked me about the brake system, very specifically. He looked back at me. She wanted to know how the hydraulic lines ran on that year Forester, where the master cylinder was, what a brake fluid leak would feel like from the driver's seat, whether you'd get a soft pedal or a hard warning light first. The air in that small office felt very still. "What did you tell her?" I said. "I told her the truth. Told her a slow leak gives you a progressively softer pedal over days or weeks. A fast leak, if a line gets cut or cracked near a fitting, you could lose most of your pressure in the first hard application. Pedal goes to the floor and stays there." He paused. She nodded like she was filing it away. Not like a person who was worried about their own car. More like a person who was taking notes on somebody else's. "Did she have any work done?" "No." His voice had gone flat. "She paid for a brake inspection, $65, and I put the car up on the lift and looked it over. Everything was fine. Lines looked good. Pads were at 40% fluid level was correct. I wrote it up and told her the car was in good shape." He stopped. "She thanked me very nicely, paid cash, and went out to the lot to get the car. And then," I said, Chet's jaw worked. "I was back in the bay with the minivan when I heard her still out there. I looked out and she was crouched down by the front passenger wheel well. I figured she dropped her keys or something. She drove away maybe 5 minutes later." He looked at me directly now, and his face had gone the color of old concrete. "I didn't think anything of it at the time. I'm thinking a lot about it right now." I reached into my breast pocket and took out my phone. I pulled up the photograph I had screenshotted from Joelle's phone the night before Talia Voss's profile picture, clear and close. I held it out to Chet. He looked at it for 3 seconds. "That's her," he said. His voice had dropped to something quieter and more serious. He handed the phone back and pressed both hands flat on the desk behind him, like he needed something solid. "Garrett," he said, "what did she do to that car?" I don't know yet," I said. "I need you to write down everything you just told me. Date, time, description, what she asked, what she did by the wheel well. Everything." "I can do that right now." "One more thing." I turned toward the bay door and looked out at Commercial Street. At the traffic moving past. At the U.S. Bank branch directly across the road, its ATM unit mounted on a post near the parking entrance camera housing angled outward. "How long has that ATM been there?" I asked. Chet came and stood beside me. "That branch 8-9 years. "Why?" "Because your camera system only keeps footage for 7 days before it overwrites," I said. "But that ATM camera is maintained by the bank. Federal retention requirements. They keep 30 days minimum." Chet turned and looked at me. "You think it caught her," he said. "I think it might have," I said. "And I think I need to make a phone call before that footage gets any older. Before I tell you what that camera captured, type still here in the comments, so I know you are with me. What comes next turns everything from suspicion into something no one can deny." One note. Some details here have been shaped for storytelling purposes and may not reflect any single event exactly. If that is not for you, the door is open. Miriam Salt had been practicing law in Salem for 31 years, and her office on Court Street, NE, reflected every one of them in the best possible way. The bookshelves were floor to ceiling, and genuinely used, not the decorative law library arrangements you saw in downtown Portland firms, where the books had clearly been ordered by the yard. Miriam's shelves had dog-eared volumes and sticky tabs and coffee rings on the spines. Her desk was a controlled disaster. She was 63 years old, small and precise, with reading glasses pushed up on her head, and the particular quality of attention that belongs to people who have spent 3 decades listening to other people's worst days and finding the legal architecture inside them. She had been my attorney for 14 years. She had handled Carol's estate after she passed. She knew me well enough to pour 2 cups of coffee without asking whether I wanted one. I laid everything out on her desk in the order it had happened. The phone call, the hospital, Spencer, Joelle's photograph, Caleb at the kitchen table, Highway 22 and the skid marks. Chet Rowan's account of the woman who had asked precisely the right questions about brake hydraulics and then crouched by the wheel well for 5 minutes. Miriam did not interrupt. She made 2 notes on a legal pad. When I finished, she looked at the notepad for a moment, then at me. "The ATM footage," she said. "You need that preserved today." "That's why I'm here," I said. "Can you file for it?" She shook her head, but it was not a dismissal, it was precision. "I can't compel a bank to hold surveillance footage on my own authority. That requires law enforcement. What I can do is get you in front of the right person right now." She was already reaching for her phone. "Do you have the name of the investigating officer?" "Detective Arvid Crane," I said. "General Investigations Unit." She dialed. It rang twice. "Arvid," she said, in the tone of someone who had called this number before. "It's Miriam Solt. I have a client in my office who needs 15 minutes of your time today. It concerns the Mullen accident on 22 yesterday." A pause. "Yes, that one. Can we come now?" Another pause, shorter. "Thank you." She hung up and looked at me. 15 minutes. Let's go. Detective Arvid Crane worked out of a corner office on the 2nd floor of the Salem Police Department on Liberty Street, SE, that smelled like recycled air and old case files. He was in his mid-40s, lean and deliberate, with the kind of face that did not give much away, and the kind of eyes that were doing a great deal more work than they appeared to be. He stood when we came in and shook hands with both of us and gestured to the 2 chairs across his desk. "Mr. Mullen," he said, "I was going to reach out to you today. I'm sorry about your daughter." "Thank you," I said. "I need to tell you some things, and I need you to listen before you decide what to do with them." He settled back in his chair. "Go ahead." I went through it again more concisely this time, because I had told it twice already, and the important parts were becoming cleaner with each repetition. Chet's account. The crouching by the wheel well. The specific questions about brake hydraulic failure. The photograph of Talia Voss. The ATM camera across the street. When I got to the part about the brake questions, Crane leaned forward very slightly. He picked up a pen. She asked specifically about the difference between a slow leak and a fast one. I said. She wanted to know whether the driver would get a warning before full pressure loss. Crane wrote something. And the mechanic confirmed she was at the vehicle alone for approximately 5 minutes after the inspection. Crouching at the front passenger wheel well, I said. That is where the brake line junction runs on a 2019 Forester. If you wanted to make a clean incision in the line at the fitting deep enough to compromise it without severing it completely, that is exactly where you would do it. Crane looked at me. You know brake systems. 40 years, I said. He was quiet for a moment. Then he picked up his phone and dialed an extension. This is Crane. I need an emergency preservation request on ATM camera footage, U.S. Bank Commercial Street, NE branch, going back 22 days. Yes, today. I'll have the paperwork to you in the hour. He hung up and looked at me. The footage will be secured. I'll have it pulled and reviewed by end of day. There's something else, I said. I slid my phone across the desk with Talia's profile picture on the screen. Her name is Talia Voss. She has been involved with my son-in-law for at least 8 months. She was photographed with him on a charter yacht in Miami yesterday afternoon, approximately 2 hours after my daughter's accident. Crane looked at the photograph for a long time. "I'm going to need a formal statement from the mechanic," he said. "He's writing it up right now," I said. "And from you." "I know," I said. "Tell me where to sit." I gave my statement to a recording officer for 40 minutes. When it was done, Crane met me in the hallway outside. "The footage came in," he said. He held his phone out. The ATM camera had captured the Dawson Auto parking lot from across the street at a slight downward angle. The resolution was not perfect, it never is, but it was more than enough. There was Talia Voss in a light jacket and sunglasses walking around the dark green Forester. There was the moment she crouched near the front passenger wheel. The timestamp in the corner of the frame ticked through 4 minutes and 11 seconds of her crouching there, both hands below the frame line before she stood up, brushed off her knees, got in the car, and drove away. 4 minutes and 11 seconds. I looked at that footage and felt something move through me that I did not have a clean word for. Not rage, not grief. Something colder and more permanent, the feeling of a thing becoming undeniable. Crane said, "Mr. Mullen, I am opening a criminal investigation into the mechanical condition of your daughter's vehicle and the circumstances of this individual's contact with it. I want you to understand what that means. This is no longer your investigation. It is mine." "I understand," I said. He looked at me steadily. "I mean that." "I know you do," I said. "I'm not going to get in your way, detective. I'm going to make sure you have everything you need." He held my gaze for a moment. Then he gave a single nod. "Go see your daughter," he said. "I'll call you when I have more." Norma Holt was waiting outside the house on Reston Drive when I pulled up at 9:30 on Sunday morning. She was standing at the end of the front walk with her arms folded across her chest and a set of keys in her right hand, and she looked like a woman who had not slept and had made peace with that fact. Her silver hair was pulled back. She was wearing the same cardigan she had on at the hospital the day before, and she had the particular stillness of someone who has already done the hardest thing, made the decision, and is simply waiting for the next step to begin. Detective Crane pulled up behind me 30 seconds later. The house was a well-kept colonial on a quiet Kaiser Street, off-white siding, dark shutters, a Japanese maple in the front yard that was just beginning to turn. The kind of house that looked like a good life from the outside. I had been to this house for Thanksgiving 3 years running and Christmas twice. I had sat in that kitchen and watched Dara move around it and thought that she seemed settled here, rooted. I had told myself the marriage was solid because I had wanted it to be solid. I had not looked closely enough. That was on me. Norma stepped forward when she saw me. "I called the title company this morning," she said before I could speak. "When Spencer and Dara bought this house, I co-signed the mortgage because Spencer's credit wasn't strong enough on his own. I am on the deed as a co-owner." Her chin was up and her voice was steady, but her eyes were red from a night of crying. "That means I have legal standing to authorize entry." "And I know," I said. "That's why I asked you to come." Crane confirmed it with a brief nod. Norma's co-ownership made the entry lawful without requiring a warrant. He had already explained this to me on the phone the previous evening when I laid out the situation. He pulled on a pair of nitrile gloves and handed a pair to me. "Photograph before you touch," he said. "And I mean everything." "I know how evidence works," I said. "Humor me," he said. The front door opened into a foyer that smelled like a candle that had been burning recently, vanilla or something in that family. Normal, domestic. The house of people who were living their lives, or who appeared to be. We went through the ground floor, first living room, kitchen, the half bath under the stairs. Everything in order. A child's backpack hanging by the door, Caleb's name written on the tag in Dara's handwriting. A grocery list on the refrigerator in the same hand. A coffee mug in the drying rack, the twin of the one Caleb had described. World's okayest human. A second mug beside it, plainer, that I did not look at for too long. The office was at the end of the upstairs hall. It was a small room, clearly used as a shared space, a desk on each side, bookshelves in between. Dara's side was orderly files stacked by date, a calendar on the wall, with appointments marked in colored pens, her laptop closed and centered on the desk. Spencer's side was messier papers pushed to the edges, a charging cable without a device attached, a coffee ring on the surface that had been there long enough to leave a permanent stain. I went to Dara's desk. In the second drawer on the right, beneath a folder of household insurance documents, I found a manila envelope. Inside was a printed form, 14 pages, the standard Oregon petition for dissolution of marriage. Every blank had been filled in Dara's neat printed hand. The date of separation she had listed was 6 weeks ago. She had been ready. She had done the work. She had just not yet taken the step. I set it down without moving it from the envelope and took a photograph. Beneath the dissolution petition, written on yellow legal paper in Dara's hand, was a list. It was not dated. It read like the private accounting of a woman who had been trying to organize her own suspicions into something she could hold. Spencer late again, said client dinner, no name given. Found receipt, hotel bar downtown Portland, not a client night. Heard a woman's voice on his phone when he left it on the counter. He grabbed it fast. He took his wedding ring off. I found it in the desk. Has not put it back. The last line written differently, heavier pen, like she had pressed harder. I think I already know. I just don't want to be right. My throat closed up entirely. I stood there with that yellow paper in my hand, not touching it, just looking at it, and I felt the full weight of what my daughter had been carrying alone in this house for weeks. The knowing without being ready to know. The love and the grief and the specific exhaustion of a person who had been waiting for the other shoe to drop and had kept getting up every morning and making coffee and packing Caleb's backpack anyway. Garrett. Crane's voice was quiet. I cleared my throat, set the photograph, moved on. Spencer's desk held less than I expected and more than I needed. In the bottom drawer, under a manila folder of old tax returns, I found his wedding ring. Gold band, plain, the same one he had worn at the ceremony I had driven up to Portland to attend 4 years ago. It was sitting loose in the corner of the drawer, as though it had been dropped there and not thought about since. I did not touch it. Crane photographed it where it lay. On the way back down the hallway, I paused at the door of Caleb's room. It was the most fully inhabited room in the house. Drawings taped to the wall, a bookshelf crammed with picture books and chapter books mixed together without much system, a stuffed dog on the pillow, with one ear worn flat from years of being held. A home that a child had made thoroughly his own. I stood in the doorway for a moment. Norma appeared beside me. She looked into her grandson's room without speaking, and her jaw trembled once before she steadied it. She was leaving him, Norma said softly. She had already decided. Yes, I said. She just needed a little more time to be ready. Her voice broke on the last word, not all the way, but enough. She is still going to get that time, I said. That is what all of this is for. Norma pressed her lips together and nodded once hard, the way people nod when they do not trust themselves to speak. We went back downstairs. Crane was standing in the kitchen looking at something on his phone. He looked up when we came in. The mechanical inspection of the vehicle is scheduled for first thing tomorrow morning, he said. I want a forensic technician present, not just our standard auto unit. He looked at me. Whatever is in that brake system, we are going to find it. I know you will, I said. Norma was pulling the front door shut behind her, keys back in her hand, when she stopped. "Detective," she said. Crane looked at her. "My son did not deserve Dara," she said. "I want you to know that I am aware of that, and I want you to know that whatever you need from me, anything you ask." Crane looked at her for a moment. His expression did not change much, but something in it acknowledged what it had cost her to say that. "Thank you, Mrs. Holt," he said. "I may take you up on that." She nodded and walked to her car. I stood on the front porch and watched her go and thought about the forensic inspection scheduled for the next morning, and about the 4 minutes and 11 seconds of ATM footage, and about the yellow legal pad in Dara's drawer with its final line pressed in heavy ink. I think I already know. I just don't want to be right. She had been right. And tomorrow we were going to prove it. The city impound yard on Commercial Street was not the kind of place designed for waiting. It was a fenced lot behind a low concrete building, chain-link topped with razor wire, a guard booth at the entrance with a heater that rattled when the compressor cycled. The morning was cold, the way Salem mornings are in early September. Not the dramatic cold of winter, but the quiet, insistent cold of a season that has decided it is coming, whether you are ready or not. I had been standing outside the fence for 2 hours and 40 minutes. I had tried sitting in the truck. That lasted 11 minutes. My body would not cooperate with sitting. There was too much happening inside my chest for sitting, a grinding, low-frequency tension that had been there since Friday afternoon and had not let up once, not even during the 3 hours I had managed to sleep on Sunday night, with my notebook on the nightstand and Caleb's slow breathing coming through the wall of the spare room. The forensic technician Crane had brought in was a woman named Paulson. I never got her first name, who had arrived at 7:15 with a case of equipment and the brisk efficiency of someone who did not need to be told what she was looking for. Crane was inside with her. I was outside the fence because Crane had been very clear on that point. "You stay out here," he had said in a tone that left no room for negotiation. The moment a defense attorney can argue that a civilian with a personal stake contaminated this inspection, the whole thing becomes complicated. "You understand me?" "I understand you," I had said, so I walked the perimeter of the fence instead. Back and forth. 11 steps one way, turn 11 steps back. A retired mechanic wearing a groove in the gravel outside a chain-link fence while someone else looked at his daughter's car. At 9:47, Crane came out through the gate. He walked toward me with his hands in the pockets of his jacket and his face arranged in the careful, neutral expression that I was beginning to recognize as his version of not letting anything out before he was ready to let it out. "Sit down," he said. "I'd rather stand." Garrett. The use of my first name was deliberate. "Sit down." I sat on the tailgate of my truck. Crane stood in front of me with his hands still in his pockets. "Shatisayam." The brake line on the front passenger side, he said, has a lateral incision approximately 1 centimeter in length at the fitting where the flexible hose meets the hard line near the caliper. It was made with a sharp-edged tool, a blade of some kind, or possibly heavy scissors, something with a fine edge. The cut goes through approximately 70% of the line wall. I looked at him. 70%, I said. Not all the way through. Deliberate. A full cut would have been obvious immediately. The car would not have moved out of the parking lot. 70% means the line holds under normal pressure. Light city driving, low speed, braking the remaining wall flexes, but holds. But under hard hydraulic demand, he paused. A long downgrade, highway speed, an emergency stop. The pressure spikes, I said. The weakened section blows. Completely. Instantaneous loss of front brake circuit. On a 2019 Forester with that brake bias, you lose the majority of your stopping power in the same moment your foot is trying hardest to find it. He looked at me steadily. Paulson says the cut is consistent with being made from below the vehicle by someone working at the wheel well area on the passenger side. The wheel well area on the passenger side. 4 minutes and 11 seconds. I put both hands flat on my thighs and pressed down hard and looked at the gravel between my boots. She knew exactly what she was doing, I said. My voice came out very even. I had not planned for it to come out that way. It just did the way a man's voice sometimes goes flat when the thing he has been afraid of confirming is finally confirmed and there is no more energy left for anything except the truth. The cut is consistent with that conclusion, Crane said. Paulson will have her full written report by end of day. She is documenting tool mark characteristics, the angle of the blade, the compression pattern on the line wall. If we find the tool, she can match it. You'll find it, I said. I intend to. He paused. There's one more thing. Paulson found a partial latent print on the hard line fitting the metal housing that the flexible hose attaches to. It is not a full print. It may not be usable, but it is there and it is going to the lab today. I stood up from the tailgate. My legs held fine. I had expected them not to. I was surprised in the same distant way you are surprised by small things when larger things are happening, that my body was functioning as normally as it was. I need to call my daughter's room, I said. Go, Crane said. I walked to the far end of the parking lot and dialed Salem Health and asked to be connected to the ICU family line. A nurse answered and told me Dara's condition was unchanged. Stable, still sedated, still being monitored, still breathing, still here. Tell her father called, I said. Even if she can't hear it. We always do, the nurse said gently. I hung up and stood there in the cold for a moment with the phone in my hand. Then I called Spencer. It rang 3 times. On the 4th ring, just before voicemail, the line connected. Spencer, I said. My voice was still flat, still even. 40 years of diagnosing broken things had taught me that the moment you raise your voice is the moment the information stops flowing. The forensic inspection of Dara's car is complete. I need you to understand what that means. The brake line was deliberately cut. 70% through at the wheel, well fitting on the passenger side, by someone who knew exactly how much pressure a brake system generates at highway speed on a downgrade. I let that sit for exactly 3 seconds. I know you did not do this yourself, but Spencer, you know something. And right now, the way this investigation is moving, the question is not going to be what Talia did. The question is going to be what you knew and when you knew it, and what you chose to do about it. Another pause. You have until tomorrow morning to decide which side of that question you want to be on. The line was quiet for a long moment. Then Spencer said in a voice that had lost every last trace of the easy real estate charm he usually carried, like a second skin, I need to talk to you. Tonight. Hospital parking lot, I said. 9 o'clock. The ICU waiting room at Salem Health had become familiar to me in the way that bad places become familiar. Not comfortable, never comfortable, but known. I knew which chair had the broken armrest. I knew the nurse at the station who always offered family members water without being asked. I knew the particular quality of the afternoon light through the west-facing window, how it turned amber around 3 o'clock and made the whole room look warmer than it was. Dara was still sedated. The swelling around her brain was responding, the neurologist had told me that morning, carefully in the language of doctors who have learned not to promise things they cannot guarantee. Her vitals were stable. They would begin the process of lightening the sedation in the next day or two, depending on how the monitoring looked overnight. She was fighting. I had known she would be. That was something she had gotten from her mother. I was reading a 2-month-old magazine without taking in a single word of it when Norma came in at 2 in the afternoon with Caleb's hand in hers. The boy had showered and changed. Norma had taken him to her house the night before, and he was carrying his backpack with the careful deliberateness of a child who has been told to be on his best behavior and is taking that instruction seriously. He had dark circles under his eyes that should not be on the face of a 7-year-old. Opa. He crossed the room and leaned against me, and I put my arm around him and held him there. Hey, bud. Can I see Mommy? Not yet, I said. She is sleeping. When she wakes up, she is going to want to see you first thing. So we are going to be right here when that happens. He nodded against my arm. Accepted this because children who love their parents trust that the adults are doing their best with impossible things. Norma sat down across from me. She set her purse on the floor and folded her hands in her lap, and looked at me with the expression she had been wearing since Saturday, the one that said she had made her choices and was prepared to live inside them. Soon I found something else. She said quietly enough that Caleb, who had picked up the magazine I had put down and was examining the pictures with the serious attention children give to things that mean nothing to them, would not hear the weight of it. At Spencer's home office, before we went in yesterday, she reached into her purse and took out a folded piece of paper. I found this in the mail that had been sitting in the box for 3 days. I should have given it to Detective Crane. I am giving it to you, and you can give it to him. I took the paper and unfolded it. It was a printout of an email sent from an address I did not recognize to Spencer's personal account. The date was 8 days ago. The subject line was blank. The body of the email read in its entirety, "She's not going to sign the papers on her own. You know that? We talked about what that means. I need you to stop stalling. No signature. No name. Just that." My jaw tightened. Norma watched my face. "I read it in the car before I came in," she said. "I have been sitting with it since last night." "You should have called me," I said. "I know." Her voice did not waver. I needed a few hours to understand what I was holding. She looked at her hands. My son has been allowing something to happen to his wife. Whether he knew exactly what form it was going to take, I am not certain. But he was not uninvolved. She looked up. "I want you to know that I know that. And I want you to know that it does not change what I am prepared to do." I refolded the paper carefully. "I'll give this to Crane today," I said. She nodded. Caleb had put down the magazine and was sitting very still now with his hands on his knees, looking at the door to the ICU corridor. "Opa," he said. "Yeah, bud." One time. He stopped, started again. "One time I heard the blonde lady on the phone. It was late, I was getting water. She was in the kitchen, and she didn't hear me on the stairs." His voice was matter of fact, the way children describe things they do not yet fully understand, but have filed away with perfect accuracy. "She was talking to somebody," she said. He scrunched his face, remembering. "She said the insurance will cover everything." And then she laughed. The room felt very still. I looked at Norma. Norma's face had gone white. "Caleb," I said carefully, "do you remember what night that was? Was it a school night or a weekend?" "Weekend," he said, "because the next day was Saturday and we had soccer." He picked the magazine back up and turned to a page with a photograph of a golden retriever and said, "Opa, can I get a dog?" And I said, "We'll talk about it. Because that is what you say." And I wrote down what he had told me in my notebook, with my hand pressed flat on the page so it would not shake. The insurance will cover everything. I thought about what Miriam had flagged earlier, that Spencer had made inquiries about Dara's life insurance policy during the financial review. The policy that named Dara as the insured. The policy that Spencer had asked about and not yet changed. I texted Crane the moment Caleb was distracted. Need to see you before 9. New email evidence, new verbal from the child. Call me. His response came back in 4 minutes on my way to the hospital, 10 minutes. The hospital parking lot at 9 o'clock on a Monday night was mostly empty. A few cars near the emergency entrance engines, idling the white overhead lights, turning everything the color of old bone. The air smelled like wet asphalt, and the particular cold that comes off the Willamette on autumn evenings, not unpleasant exactly, but insistent. The kind of cold that gets into your collar no matter how you button your coat. Spencer was leaning against the passenger side of a rental car. I did not recognize the Range Rover I had learned from Crane was currently the subject of a financial review connected to some of the credit transfers Miriam had flagged. He had changed clothes since the hospital visit that afternoon. He was wearing a dark jacket and jeans, and his hands were pushed deep into his pockets, and he looked in the flat white light of the parking lot like a man who had spent the day walking in circles inside his own head and had arrived somewhere he could not get back from. I parked and got out. We faced each other across 10 feet of empty asphalt. "Thank you for coming," Spencer said. His voice was careful, stripped of everything. "You asked me to," I said. "Talk." He exhaled. His breath showed white in the cold air and dissolved. "I did not know she was going to touch the car," he said. "I want you to believe that because it is true, and I understand if you don't, and there is nothing I can say that will make you trust me, but it is true." "Then tell me what you did know," I said. He looked at the ground. His jaw worked. When he looked back up, his eyes were wet, not with the easy theatrical tears of a man managing an audience, but with the specific reluctant moisture of someone who has been holding something back for days and is losing the ability to keep holding it. "She told me she would handle it," he said. Those were her exact words. We had been fighting about it for months. Talia wanted me to leave Dara. I kept stalling. She kept escalating. 2 weeks ago, she said, he stopped, pressed his lips together hard. She said she was done waiting. She said she would handle the situation and that I needed to stop asking questions and trust her. "And you didn't ask what handle it meant," I said. I told myself it meant she was going to do something to force the issue. Make Dara find out about us. Something like that. His voice cracked on the last 2 words. I told myself that. I chose to tell myself that. "Spencer." I took 2 steps toward him, not threatening, just close enough that he had to look at me directly. "A forensic technician found a deliberate incision in your wife's brake line today. 70% through the wall at the wheel, well-fitting, placed by someone who knew exactly where to cut and how deep to go. That is not a woman forcing an affair into the open. That is a woman trying to make your wife disappear." Spencer's face collapsed. Not broke, collapsed the way a structure goes when the thing it was built on is suddenly not there anymore. His chin went down to his chest, and a sound came out of him that was not quite crying and not quite anything else. A low-pressured animal sound of a man understanding in one moment the full dimensions of what he had allowed to happen. "Oh God," he said. His voice was barely audible. "Oh God, I didn't." "I know you didn't cut that line," I said. "But Spencer, you knew something was coming and you looked away. That is not nothing. That is a choice. And right now, the only thing that matters is whether you make a different choice." He straightened up slowly. His eyes were red and wet, and his face was a wreck. But underneath the wreck, something had shifted, something that looked like the first trembling appearance of a decision. "What do I have to do?" he said. "You give everything to Detective Crane," I said. "Not to me, not to a lawyer you hire tonight. To Crane directly tonight. Every text message, every email, every conversation you can remember. You give him the phone, and you give him your account of every interaction you had with Talia in the last 2 months. And you do not leave anything out, because I promise you, Spencer, anything you leave out will be found. And the difference between a man who cooperated fully and a man who cooperated partially is the difference between a charge of failure to report and a charge of criminal conspiracy." His breath came out in a long, shaking exhale. "She's going to say I planned it with her," he said. "You know that. The moment she realizes I've turned on her, she is going to tell them I was the one who—" "Then I know," I said. "And Crane knows that too. The evidence does not support it, the footage of Talia at the garage, her questions to Chet about the brake system, the incision angle consistent with someone working from below the car. None of that has Spencer Holt's fingerprints on it, literally or figuratively." I paused. "But your cooperation or lack of it will be part of the record. Make sure what the record says about you is that you came forward." He was quiet for a moment, breathing carefully. Then he said, "Is she going to be okay, Dara? Is she—" "She is fighting," I said. "She has been fighting since Friday, that is all I know." He closed his eyes, opened them. "Okay," he said. "Call Crane. I'll wait here." I took out my phone and called Crane, who had been waiting in the hospital lobby at my request, because there are some conversations that need to happen between two people before a third is present, and I had known this would be one of them. "He's ready," I said into the phone. "Parking lot north end." 3 minutes later, Crane's headlights came around the corner of the building. Spencer stood up straight when he saw the car. He pulled his phone out of his jacket pocket, looked at it for a moment, the way a person looks at something they are about to put down and not pick up again for a very long time, and held it out toward Crane as the detective got out of his car. "Everything is on there," Spencer said. His voice had steadied into something quieter and more final. "Everything." Crane took the phone. He looked at Spencer for a moment. "Mr. Holt," he said, "I need you to come with me and give a full recorded statement tonight. Do you understand your rights in that process?" "Yes," Spencer said. "Do you want an attorney present?" Spencer glanced at me. I did not nod or shake my head. That was not my decision to make. "Not tonight," Spencer said. "Tonight I just want to tell somebody the truth." Crane opened the rear door of his car. Spencer got in without another word. I stood in the cold parking lot and watched the car move toward the exit, its taillights making 2 red lines in the dark before it turned onto the street and was gone. Somewhere upstairs, in a bed with monitors and tubes and the careful machinery of modern medicine, my daughter was breathing. I took out my phone and checked the time, 9:34 p.m., and thought about Talia Voss, who did not yet know that the man she had been counting on to stay quiet had just gotten into a police car. She did not know, but she was going to find out. And when she did, the question was what she would do next. I thought I knew the answer. I called Dex. Miriam's office on Tuesday morning smelled like fresh coffee and the particular focused energy of a woman who had been working since 6. She had both her legal pads out, one for the criminal track, one for the civil, and she was on the phone when Crane and I came in, speaking in the clipped, precise shorthand she used when she was talking to another attorney and did not need to explain her terms. She held up one finger without looking at us and finished the call in 30 seconds. "Sit," she said. We sat. Talia Voss checked out of the extended stay on Fisher Road at 11:17 last night, Crane said, setting a folder on her desk. Paid her bill in cash, no forwarding. Her cell phone has been off since approximately 10 p.m., which is consistent with her being notified directly or indirectly that Spencer Holt gave a statement. Miriam looked at me. Who knew Spencer was talking to you last night? Nobody, I said. Except Crane and Dex. Then she had a contingency, Miriam said. She pulled the folder toward her and opened it. She planned for Spencer breaking. She had a bag ready. That is my read, Crane said. Where does she go? I asked. Crane leaned forward. That is what I want to talk through. Talia Voss is a U.S. citizen born in Medford, Oregon. She has a passport, or she did. The passport was submitted for renewal 11 days ago. The processing office in Portland has it. He looked at me. She cannot leave the country without it, which means she cannot get on an international flight. She could drive to Canada, I said. She could, Crane said. But her car, a leased Honda Accord registered to an address in Beaverton, was still in the extended stay parking lot when we checked at midnight. Either she got a ride which we are tracing, or Dex's voice came through my phone speaker from the center of the table where I had set it on speaker at the start of the meeting. I had called him before driving to Miriam's office, and he had asked to listen in. Or she went somewhere she thinks is safe, Dex said. Somewhere she has been before. Somewhere she has things stored. His voice was even and unhurried, the voice of a man who had chased people for 26 years and had stopped being surprised by their patterns. A runner with a plan always has a fallback location, an apartment she sublets, a storage unit, a friend's place she visited twice that nobody knows about. That is where the passport money and whatever she needs is. Hakitas, her lease records show a secondary address, Crane said. An apartment in the Pearl District in Portland. Listed as a sublet not in her name, but she has been paying the utility bills on it for 7 months. She's going back for the passport renewal receipt and whatever cash she has there, Dex said. She has to. She cannot function without those things. The question is when. Tonight, I said. Everyone looked at me. She does not know we have that address. She thinks she has time. She will wait until she is certain the hotel is not being watched, which she has already done by leaving last night. She will let 1 full day pass. Then tonight, when she thinks it is clear, she goes back. Crane looked at Dex's phone. Pruitt, you agree? I agree, Dex said. One more thing, Garrett. You stay away from that apartment. I mean it. You have built this case clean from the beginning. Do not give anyone a reason to say you had personal contact with the suspect before her arrest. Everything you have done has been documentable and at arm's length. Keep it that way. I looked at the phone. I hear you, I said. That is not the same as agreeing, Dex said. I hear you and I agree, I said. Crane had already pulled out his radio. He was coordinating 2 plainclothes officers for the Pearl District address by the time I had finished my coffee. Miriam looked across her desk at me when Crane stepped into the hallway to make his calls. How are you holding up? She said. It was not a question she asked lightly. In 14 years, she had asked it exactly twice before, once when Carol died, and once when a supplier tried to take me to court over a contract dispute that turned ugly. Both times she had waited until the room was quiet before she asked it, and both times I had known she meant it. I am holding up the way a man holds up when his daughter is in the ICU, and the person who put her there is still walking around free, I said. Which is not gracefully, but I am holding up. She nodded once. That was enough for her. She will not be walking around free much longer, she said. Crane came back in. He sat down and looked at both of us. 2 officers on the Pearl District address starting at 6 p.m., he said. Rotating. If she shows, they will hold her for me to arrive before they move. I want to be there. And if she doesn't show tonight, I asked. She will, Crane said. He looked very certain. The passport renewal receipt is her ticket out. Without it, she cannot claim the passport when processing completes. And that passport completes in 4 days. He paused. She is not going to leave the country on foot with cash she can spend domestically. She needs that document. She will come back for it. I thought about Talia Voss, in some room somewhere running the same arithmetic in her head, what she needed, how long she could wait, whether anyone had found the Pearl District address yet. She was smart. She had planned carefully for a long time. But she had not planned for Caleb at the top of the stairs. She had not planned for Chet Rowan remembering her exact questions about hydraulic pressure. She had not planned for a retired mechanic who had spent 40 years understanding exactly how machines break, standing on the shoulder of Highway 22 at dawn and knowing in his bones that the skid marks were wrong. I drove to the hospital that afternoon, and I sat beside my daughter's bed, and I told her what I always told her when I needed her to hear something important and was not sure she could. We're almost there, kid, I said. We're almost there. I was in the hospital parking lot at 7:14 the next morning when Crane called. I had been there since 6:30, not because I had a reason to be there that early, but because my house had stopped being a place I could sit still in. I had made coffee, drunk half of it, poured the rest down the drain, and driven to Salem Health because the hospital was where Dara was, and being close to where Dara was the only thing that felt like doing something. I picked up on the first ring. She came back at 11:47, Crane said. His voice had the specific quality of controlled satisfaction, not triumph, not celebration, but the quiet professional acknowledgement of a thing going exactly as it was supposed to go. She used a key. Side entrance. She was in the apartment for approximately 4 minutes before my officers made contact. I closed my eyes and pressed my back against the seat. Is she in custody? I said. She is. She is being held at the Portland Police Bureau's Central Precinct, pending transfer to Marion County. I am heading there now. A pause. Do you want to know what they found in the apartment? Yes, I said. A passport renewal receipt, as expected. Approximately $4,000 in cash in a waterproof bag in the kitchen cabinet, behind the cereal boxes, the kind of hiding place that works until it doesn't. A pair of latex gloves, unused, same brand as a box found in the trunk of her leased Accord. A photograph printed not digital of Dara's Forester, taken from a distance from a parking lot across from the hospital where Dara works. Shot from an angle that captures the front passenger wheel well clearly. He stopped for a moment. A printed copy of Dara's work schedule for the month of August. Her shifts, her regular commute window, her days off. The column for Friday the 5th was circled. The morning air outside the car felt very cold. She had been watching her, I said. For at least a month, Crane said. Possibly longer. This was not impulsive. This was planned with a level of detail that is going to be very difficult to walk back in front of a jury. She is going to say Spencer planned it with her, I said. She already did, Crane said. In the first 10 minutes of the interview before her public defender arrived and advised her to stop talking, she told the interviewing officer that Spencer was the one who identified the brake line as the method and provided the work schedule. He paused. Mr. Mullen, I want you to understand what she is going to face when she tries to maintain that in court. The ATM footage shows Talia Voss alone at Chet Rowan's garage. Chet's written statement establishes that she asked specifically about hydraulic brake pressure failure. Spencer was not present and is not mentioned. Spencer's phone records, which we pulled overnight, show no communication between him and Talia in the 2 weeks preceding the accident that references Dara's car, her commute, or any mechanical subject. What the records do show is Talia sending Spencer on September 3rd a message that reads, "handled." That is it. One word. "Unhandled," I said. "Yes," Crane said. Which Spencer in his statement confirmed he received and chose not to question. I let that sit. There was a version of the world in which I felt something like satisfaction at that moment. I had expected to feel it, that specific clean sense of a thing concluded, a door closing on the right side of justice. What I actually felt was tired. Deeply, specifically tired. The kind that comes not from lack of sleep, but from having been very alert for a very long time and understanding suddenly that the alertness is no longer required in the same way. "What happens now?" I said. "She will be arraigned in Portland today and transferred to Marion County by end of week. The charges will be deliberate sabotage of a motor vehicle, first-degree assault, and attempted murder. The DA's office has been briefed. Given the physical evidence, the witness testimony, the communications record, and the level of premeditation documented in that apartment." Crane paused. "This is a strong case, Garrett. This is a very strong case." I thanked him and ended the call. I sat in the parking lot for a few minutes, looking at the entrance to Salem Health. Then I went inside and took the elevator to the ICU floor. The nurse at the station, the one who always offered water without being asked, looked up when I came in, and her expression was different from its usual careful neutrality. There was something in it that made me stop walking. "Mr. Mullen," she said, "Dr. Virapin was just looking for you." My heart moved hard against my sternum. "What happened?" I said. My voice came out tight. She smiled. It was a real smile, not the controlled professional expression of someone managing bad news, but the genuine, unguarded smile of someone who has good news and is glad to be the one delivering it. "Your daughter is waking up," she said. The door to Dara's room was half open. I stood in the hallway outside it for a moment, just a moment, with my hand on the doorframe, and my heart doing something it had not done since Friday afternoon. Not the heavy, grinding compression of fear. Something else. Something lighter and more frightening in its own way, the way hope is always more frightening than despair, because despair has already absorbed its own worst outcome. I pushed the door open and went in. Dr. Virapin was standing on the far side of the bed, checking the monitor readings. She looked up when I entered and gave me a small, careful nod that meant things are moving in the right direction, but I am not making promises yet. Dara was in the same position she had been in for the past 7 days, elevated slightly. The bandaging around her head reduced now from the original compression wrapping to something less dramatic. The breathing tube replaced 2 days ago by a nasal cannula. She looked small in the bed, in the way that people always look small in hospital beds, as if illness temporarily returns them to some earlier, more fragile version of themselves. But her eyes were open, not fully, not the wide, clear eyes of a woman fully present. They were half-open, heavy-lidded, moving slowly around the room with the careful, slightly unfocused attention of someone who has been gone a long time and is recalibrating to the place they left. I crossed the room in 4 steps and sat down in the chair beside her bed and took her hand carefully around the IV line and held it the way I had held it every day for the past week, except that now her fingers tightened slightly around mine. "Hey," I said. My voice came out rough. I cleared my throat. "Hey, kid." Her eyes found my face, Something moved in them, recognition, slow and dawning, like a light coming on in stages rather than all at once. Her lips moved. Daddy. The word came out scratched and barely there, her voice worn down to almost nothing by the tube that had been in her throat. But it was the most complete word I had ever heard in my life. My throat closed entirely. I leaned forward and pressed my forehead against her hand, and stayed there for a moment, while something moved through me that I am not going to try to describe, precisely because I do not think I can. It was not relief. Relief is too small a word. It was the sensation of a weight that you have been carrying for so long. You had stopped being aware of its specific mass being set down, and the sudden awareness of the absence of it, and the way your body does not quite know what to do with the space. "I'm here," I said when I could say something. "I'm right here." Dr. Virapin gave us 20 minutes before she came back in with a nurse to run a full assessment. She spoke to Dara in the quiet, measured way of someone who has done a great many wake-up evaluations and knows exactly what to look for. Dara answered in words that came slowly and required effort. Yes, no, I don't know, a little, but she answered. She tracked the doctor's finger with her eyes. She squeezed both hands on command. She knew her name, and she knew mine, and she knew that she was in a hospital. When the doctor stepped out to write up her notes, I stayed in the chair with Dara's hand in mine. She was more awake now. Still slow, still effortful, but more awake. "Caleb," she said. "He is safe," I said. "He has been staying with me. He is going to come see you today. He has been asking every single morning." Something that was trying to be a smile crossed her face. It did not quite make it all the way, but the intention was there. "What happened?" she said. It was not quite a question. "Your car," I said carefully. "We will talk about all of it when you are stronger. Right now, I just need you to know that it is being handled, all of it." She looked at me steadily. "Spencer," she said. "I know, Kana," I said. Her eyes stayed on mine for a moment. She did not cry. I had expected her to cry. I think I had been expecting it on her behalf for the whole week, carrying the tears she had not been able to have. But she did not cry. She looked at me with the clear, exhausted eyes of a woman who had already done most of her grieving before the accident on quiet nights in the house on Reston Drive, and simply nodded once. Then she said in a voice that was getting slightly steadier with each attempt, "Before it happened, there was a car, behind me, a silver." She stopped, her brow furrowed with the effort of reaching for something through the medication and the damage. "Silver sedan. It was following me. I thought I was imagining it." Then the pedal. "I know," I said. "You don't need to do this right now." "No." Her grip on my hand tightened slightly. "I need to say it. It wasn't an accident." Her eyes were very clear now. "There was a car following me, Daddy, and it wasn't Spencer." I looked at her. "I know," I said. "You already knew," she said. "I already knew," I said. She let out a long breath, and her eyes closed briefly, not from unconsciousness, but from the specific exhaustion of having gotten out the thing that needed to be said. When she opened them again, she looked lighter. Not better exactly, not healed, but lighter the way people look when they have been carrying a secret they were not sure anyone would believe, and have finally put it in someone else's hands. The door opened. Caleb came in at a half-run, the way children enter rooms they have been waiting outside of his sneakers, squeaking on the linoleum, his face split open into the most complete expression of joy and relief I had seen in a week. He slowed down just before the bed because a nurse had clearly briefed him on the way in, and he reached out and took his mother's free hand in both of his. "Mommy," he said. His voice was thick, You woke up. I woke up, Dara said. Her voice broke on the last word. Her eyes filled and spilled over, not from pain, not from grief, but from the specific, overwhelming relief of a mother looking at her child. I woke up, baby. I'm right here. Caleb put his forehead down on her hand the same way I had done 20 minutes before. I stood up from my chair. I walked to the window and looked out at the Salem skyline, the familiar low profile of the city, the Douglas firs along the ridge to the east, the gray September sky beginning to break up in the west where the coast was. My daughter was alive. She had told me what I needed to hear. And somewhere across town in a holding room at the Marion County Jail, Talia Voss was sitting with the knowledge that every door had just closed. I took out my phone and called Crane. She remembers, I said. She saw the car behind her, silver sedan. She confirmed it was not Spencer. I paused. You have your eyewitness, Crane said. I'll be there within the hour. I hung up and turned back to the room to my daughter and my grandson, her hand in his forehead on her knuckles, both of them making the quiet sounds of people who have found each other again after being lost. I did not go back to the chair. I stood by the window and let them have the room. That was enough. That was more than enough. Marion County Courthouse sat on High Street in downtown Salem. The way old courthouses do in small American cities, solid and deliberate, brick and stone, built in an era when public buildings were meant to communicate permanence. I had driven past it 1,000 times in 40 years of living in this city. I had never had reason to go inside until October. The courtroom for Spencer's plea hearing was on the second floor, a modest room with wood paneling and fluorescent lighting and the particular smell of institutional carpet and old paperwork that seems to be standard issue for every county courthouse in America. The gallery had 12 rows of benches, maybe 20 people in them, mostly attorneys and clerks going about the routine business of the day, plus Miriam seated beside me and Norma Holt seated 2 rows behind us alone. I had asked Norma the night before whether she wanted to sit with me. She had said, I think I need to be able to see his face when it happens, and I think I need to do that by myself. I had not argued. Spencer came in through the side door with his defense attorney, a man named Greer from a firm in Portland that charged enough per hour to make your eyes water. Spencer was wearing a dark suit I recognized from the wedding rehearsal dinner 4 years ago. He sat at the defense table and folded his hands on the surface in front of him and did not look at the gallery. The hearing ran 45 minutes. Spencer Holt entered a guilty plea to 3 charges: criminal misprision, the federal offense of knowing about a crime and failing to report it, reckless endangerment, and obstruction of a law enforcement investigation. Greer had negotiated hard. The DA had negotiated back. What they had arrived at was a suspended sentence with 3 years of supervised probation, 200 hours of community service mandatory counseling, and the complete and permanent termination of Spencer's parental rights regarding Caleb Holt, with sole legal and physical custody transferred to Dara. The last part had been Miriam's doing. She had pushed for it specifically, and the DA had agreed because Spencer's cooperation in the Talia Voss prosecution was worth something, and this was the currency in which it was paid. Before sentencing was formally read, the judge, a woman in her 60s with reading glasses and the unhurried manner of someone who had presided over a great many moments like this one, asked Spencer if he had anything to say. Spencer stood. He looked at his hands for a moment. Then he looked up, and for the first time since he had come into the room, he turned his face toward the gallery. He did not look at me. He looked at Norma. I know there is nothing I can say that fixes what I allowed to happen, he said. His voice was controlled, but barely. I am not going to try to explain it or justify it. I am just... He stopped. His jaw tightened. I am sorry, Mom. I am sorry for what you had to do today. I am sorry for all of it." Norma did not look away from her son. Her chin was up. Her eyes were dry, and they were going to stay dry. I could see the decision in her face, the same quiet iron that had been there since the night she handed me her house keys in a hospital hallway. She did not nod. She did not shake her head. She held his gaze for a long moment, and then she looked down at her hands in her lap, and that was her answer. The judge read the sentence. Spencer sat back down. Greer leaned over and said something to him in a low voice. Spencer nodded without really hearing it. I watched him and felt something I had not expected to feel. Not satisfaction, not anger, not even the exhausted relief I had felt in the parking lot the morning Crane called about Talia's arrest. What I felt was something closer to grief. The grief of watching a man who had everything he needed to be decent, a good wife, a son who adored him, a family that had welcomed him, take it apart with his own hands because he had been too weak and too afraid and too willing to look away. That is a particular kind of sadness. I do not have a better word for it. Miriam touched my arm. "That's done," she said quietly. "One more." Outside in the corridor afterward, Norma found me. She looked like she had run a very long race and was still deciding whether she had won or lost. "How are you?" I said. She shook her head slightly, not a refusal to answer, but the gesture of someone for whom the question is temporarily too large. "I keep thinking," she said, "about all the times I could have said something, about the times I noticed things and told myself it was none of my business." Her voice was level, but the effort it took was visible. "He is my son, and I love him, and I am going to have to figure out what that means now going forward." She looked at me directly. "But Dara and Caleb come first, whatever that requires from me." "I know," I said. She straightened her coat. "Next month," she said, with the deliberateness of someone making an appointment rather than a statement. "Talia Voss." "Next month," I agreed. She walked down the corridor toward the elevator, and I watched her go, and I thought that if I were a different kind of man, I might have said something to her about courage. But Norma Holt did not need anyone to name what she had done today. She already knew exactly what it had cost her. The November morning was wet, the way Salem mornings in November always are, a fine, persistent rain that did not bother making itself dramatic, just settled in and committed. I was in the second row of the gallery when Talia Voss was brought into the courtroom. I had not seen her in person since the day this began. I had seen the ATM footage, the photograph from Joelle's phone, the printed picture found in her Pearl District apartment of Dara's car in a parking lot. But I had not been in the same room with her. She was smaller than I had imagined, which is something people often say, and which is almost always true. She was wearing the standard issue clothing of the county jail. No jewelry, no carefully chosen outfit. None of the presentation that the Instagram photograph had suggested. Her blonde hair was pulled back. She sat at the defense table with her public defender, a young man who looked like he had graduated recently and was doing his best, and she held herself with a kind of deliberate composure that was working hard to look like calm. When they brought her in, she scanned the gallery. Her eyes found me. I looked back at her steadily. I did not look away, and I did not look angry, and I did not give her anything to read in my face except the fact of my presence, that I was here, that I had been here from the beginning, that I would be here at the end. After a moment, she looked away first. The trial had run 4 days. I had been present for all of them. The prosecution's case was built on 4 pillars presented in order by an assistant DA named Howell, who was methodical and unhurried, and very good at her job. First, the ATM footage. Played twice for the jury, once at regular speed, once slowed. 4 minutes and 11 seconds. The jury watched it both times without any sound in the room except the faint hum of the projector. Second, Chet Rowan's testimony. Chet took the stand in the same work shirt he wore every day, and he told the jury exactly what he had told me in his office 2 months ago. The woman with the blonde hair, the questions about hydraulic pressure, and what a driver would feel before full brake failure, the 5 minutes crouching at the wheel well. The defense attorney objected twice. Howell sustained her line both times. Chet did not waver. Third, Spencer's testimony. He came in looking like a man who had been sleeping badly and making peace with the fact that this was now his life. He sat in the witness box and answered every question Howell put to him in a flat, careful voice, the text messages, the phone calls, the day Talia told him she would handle the situation, and he had chosen not to ask what that meant. He confirmed that Talia had been the one to identify Dara's work schedule, that Talia had been the one to raise the subject of Dara's life insurance policy in the context of their relationship, that Talia had been the one to say, on 3 separate occasions, that Spencer could document that things would be easier if Dara was simply not a factor. The defense cross-examined Spencer for 90 minutes. They suggested he had planned everything and was using Talia as a scapegoat. Spencer answered every question the same way, quietly, without defensiveness, pointing always to the specific things he had not known and the specific things he had chosen not to find out. The distinction held because the evidence held. Fourth, Dara's testimony. She came in on a cane. Her balance was still not fully recovered, and the doctors had told her it might be months before it was, and she sat in the witness box with her hands folded and her face composed, and she told the jury in a steady voice that I watched, cost her something real about the silver sedan in her rearview mirror on the afternoon of September 5th, about the way it had stayed with her through 2 lane changes, about the moment on the downgrade when she pressed the brake pedal and found nothing there. She described the sedan's position, its color, the way it had dropped back slightly when her car began to lose control. She said, "I knew it was not an accident. I knew before I hit the guardrail that it was not an accident." The courtroom was very quiet when she said that. Howell rested the prosecution's case on the afternoon of the 3rd day. The defense had called 2 witnesses, an automotive expert who suggested the brake line damage could have been caused by road debris, and a character witness who had known Talia in college. Howell had dismantled the automotive expert with Paulson's forensic report and a 10-minute cross-examination that left the expert visibly uncomfortable. The character witness had not helped much. On the morning of the 4th day, the jury went out. They came back in 3 hours and 40 minutes. The foreperson, a man in his 50s in a flannel shirt, the kind of face you see at every hardware store and school board meeting in Oregon, stood and read the verdicts in a level voice. Guilty of deliberate sabotage of a motor vehicle. Guilty of first-degree assault causing serious physical injury. Guilty of attempted murder in the 1st degree. The room did not erupt. Courtrooms rarely do, despite what films suggest. There was a collective exhalation, the sound of a room full of people releasing something they had been holding. And then the procedural machinery of the law began to move forward, scheduling and motions and dates. Talia Voss sat at the defense table with her hands flat on the surface, and her face doing the thing faces do when the thing they were most afraid of has just been confirmed. She turned and looked at me one more time. I was already gathering my coat. There was nothing left to say in that room. Miriam was beside me as we walked out into the corridor. "Sentencing in February," she said. "Given the charge profile and the premeditation documentation, the work schedule, the surveillance photograph, Howell is going for 25 to life." "I know," I said. We walked down the corridor toward the elevator in the November rainlight coming through the tall windows. I thought about a woman sitting in a small room in the jail on Turner Road, working through the arithmetic of choices made over months, the questions asked in a mechanic's office, the photographs taken in a hospital parking lot, the text message sent on a Tuesday afternoon that read "only handled," and arriving at the same place every time. Seeds grow into exactly what you plant. I pressed the elevator button and waited. December in Salem comes in quietly. Not the dramatic arrival of winter that other parts of the country get. No first snow, no hard freeze, just a gradual deepening of the gray, the days shortening almost imperceptibly until one afternoon you look up and realize the light is gone by 4:30, and you have already adjusted to it without noticing. I had painted Dara's old room in the second week of November. She had picked the color a warm off-white she called "not quite cream." And Caleb had helped me with the roller on the lower sections of the wall, his contribution consisting primarily of paint on his forearms and a great deal of editorial commentary on my technique. He had laughed his way through the whole afternoon, that particular laugh that children have when they are doing something alongside an adult who has given them real responsibility, not just the appearance of it. I had framed 2 photographs for the wall. One was of Dara at 7 years old, sitting on the hood of a '78 Camaro I had been restoring that summer, squinting into the sun. The other was of her and Caleb from last Christmas, before all of this, before any of this. Her arm around his shoulders, his face turned up toward hers, both of them in the middle of laughing at something outside the frame. I hung them on a Tuesday evening and stood back and looked at them for a while. Dara had been home for 3 weeks. She was moving slowly. Still, the cane was a fixture. The balance therapy twice a week at Salem Health. The headaches that came without warning in the late afternoons and required her to lie down in the off-white room with the curtains drawn. Recovery from a traumatic brain injury does not follow a schedule and does not respond well to impatience, which meant that Dara and I had spent considerable time in the kitchen together in the mornings because the kitchen was where she felt steadiest, and I had nowhere better to be. We had talked in those mornings, more than we had talked in years, about Carol, her mother, my wife, and about what it had been like to grow up with a father who expressed love primarily through fixing things, about the marriage and what she had known and what she had refused to know, and how those 2 things had coexisted for longer than was comfortable to admit, about Caleb and what to tell him, and how much truth a 7-year-old could carry, and how much needed to be saved for later. Spencer had come to the house on a Saturday in late November. He had called first, that much he had the presence of mind to do. I had opened the door and looked at him for a moment, and then I stepped back and let him in because he was Caleb's father, and that fact did not disappear because of everything else that was true about him. He and Dara had talked in the living room for 40 minutes, while I stayed in the kitchen with Caleb helping him with a model airplane kit that had been sitting in the closet since his last birthday. We could hear the murmur of voices, but not the words. When Dara came into the kitchen afterward, she sat down at the table with a cup of tea and both hands around the mug and looked out the window for a moment. "He cried," she said. "I expect he did," I said. "He wanted to know if I hated him." She looked at me. I told him I didn't. I told him hate takes energy I don't have right now, and that's true. She paused. I told him I forgave him, not because he deserved it, because I don't want to carry it. "That is wisdom," I said. "That's exhaustion," she said, but she was almost smiling. Caleb looked up from his model airplane. "Is Dad gone?" "Yes, Bud," Dara said. "Okay," Caleb said, and went back to the wings with the focused serenity of a child who has placed the adult world in a category labeled "not my problem right now," and returned to what matters. Norma came every Thursday. She brought groceries and stayed for dinner and read to Caleb after the meal, and hugged Dara when she left with the particular fierceness of a woman who has decided what she is going to be going forward and is not going to be talked out of it. She and I had not discussed Spencer again after the courthouse corridor in October. There was nothing left to discuss. She was doing what she was doing, and it was enough, and it was more than most people would have done. On a Thursday evening in the second week of December, after Norma had gone and Caleb was asleep, and Dara was reading in her room with the light on under the door, I went out to the garage. The fluorescent lights came on with their familiar flicker and hum. The smell was exactly as it had always been, motor oil and metal and the particular dusty warmth of a space that has been used for real work over a long period of time. The Camaro I had been restoring for Pete Garfield was back on the lift where I had left it. The exhaust bolt I had been working on still waiting for me. The wrench was on the floor, exactly where I had dropped it on the afternoon of September 5th, when the phone rang and everything changed. I had not moved it. I am not sure why not as a memorial, not as a reminder, just the way objects sometimes stay where they fall when there are more important things to attend to, and then time passes, and you stop noticing them. I picked it up. It was a standard 3/8 drive ratchet, nothing special, the kind of tool that has lived in 1,000 garages in 1,000 American towns. I turned it over in my hands once and set it on the workbench where it belonged. Then I sat down on the old wooden stool in the corner, the one that had been in this garage since 1987, the one Carol had painted blue one summer because she said plain wood was depressing, and I looked around at the familiar landscape of my working life. I was not a rich man. I did not have a security team or a private jet or a network of powerful people who owed me favors. I was a retired mechanic in Salem, Oregon, with a Ford F-150 that needed new shocks, and a garage full of tools I knew how to use, and a life that had taught me one repair at a time that most broken things can be fixed if you are patient enough to find exactly where the damage is. I had found it. Not perfectly. Not without help. Dex and Miriam and Crane and Chet and Norma and Caleb, all of them, each one, a necessary part of something I could not have built alone, and not without cost. There were nights ahead for Dara that I could not fix the headaches, the balance therapy, the long, slow work of rebuilding a life after someone has tried to take it from you. But she was here. She was in the off-white room with the light on under the door, reading a book, breathing here. I sat in the garage for a while longer, in the particular quiet of a December evening in Oregon, when the rain has stopped and the cold has settled and everything is still. Then I turned off the lights and went inside to where my family was. The wrench was on the workbench where it belonged. And so was everything else. I am not a man who tells his stories easily, but I told this one because I think someone out there needs to hear it. I ignored the signs for too long. I told myself it was not my business. I told myself my daughter was a grown woman who could handle her own life. And because I looked away, she almost did not have a life left to handle. That is something I will carry until God decides I have carried it long enough. If you are a grandfather, a father, a parent of any kind, do not make my mistake. Pay attention to the small things. The missing wedding ring, the late-night phone calls, the railing that never quite got fixed. God puts those details in front of us for a reason. Do not let pride or politeness talk you out of asking the hard question while the answer still matters. These grandpa stories, we carry the ones about love and loss, and what we did when everything was on the line, they are worth telling. Because someone in your life right now may be standing in front of a door they cannot open alone. This has been one of the hardest family revenge story chapters of my life. But God was in that garage with me the morning I picked up the phone, and I believe God kept my daughter breathing until I could get there. If this story reached your heart, leave a comment and tell me where you are watching from. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more grandpa stories and more family revenge story journeys like this one, subscribe and stay close. I will be here.